Happy Easter to you all and God bless. Uh, this is sort of an anniversary of sorts for me because it was about 3, 4 years ago, something like that. I stopped on the side of the road. Back then, I used to work early every Sunday. So I stopped and I was doing I filmed like the sunrise and I did what I called at that time an Easter message. Well, believe it or not, that Easter message was so well received by not only uh, Christians, but also even some of my friends who are non-believers even complimented me on it, and told me how great I did. And my good buddy Scott Birchfield told me that I needed to maybe do it on a weekly basis, and so so I did. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've been doing a Sunday message almost every Sunday ever since. But you're wondering what Easter is. To some people, Easter is chocolate bunnies, eggs, Easter egg hunts, eating ham, having cookouts, grilling out, yada, 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 and yada. But what Easter was actually about was, Jesus Christ. You know, he started his ministry. He went around, he performed miracles. He, preached to the masses. He fed a multitude of people with just like 7 fish, something like that. I probably got the number wrong. But he performed all these miracles, and he was getting more and more popular among the people that the Roman government was afraid of him, more or less. So they had plans of killing him. So what they done is one of Jesus' disciples, Judas Iscariot, actually betrayed Jesus, and they captured him. Well, of course, he stood trial, and there were several times that he could have, more or less, just by speaking up, he could have more or less, got his charges dropped. But he refused to do that. And even the Pontius Pilate, I probably said that name wrong, but he was, he's like, I see no fault in this man. I want to turn him loose. And of course, I'm obviously paraphrasing, but the masses were like, crucifying, crucifying, crucifying. And so he more or less had to do what the popular vote was. And so he sentenced Jesus to be crucified, but he washed his hands of it, and it's probably where that saying comes from. But he washed his hands of it, and they nailed him to a cross, and of course he died with great suffering. But of course, before they crucified him, they beat him half to death, with whips, and so he was basically bleeding profusely before they even put him up there. And of course, he was crying out in pain, and he was even said, people were gathered around watching. He even said, God, why have you forsaken me? And then he said, it is finished, and he passed. Well, it was getting ready to be, the end of the Passover, so they were going to take his body down, and they pierced his side with a sword, and of course he had no blood left. He basically bled to death. So after a while, they put him in a tomb. Well, the next day was the Sabbath, so nobody was allowed to do anything on the Sabbath. So the next day, these two women, they were going to, anoint his body, and but at that point in time, there was a great earthquake. Well, when they get there, they see an angel, and the angel says, Why are you looking in a tomb for somebody who is not dead, for he is risen? And so he appeared to them, showed his hands, where he had been nailed to the cross, and at that point in time, well, let me backtrack a little bit. Well, as he was at his moment of death in the temple, there was a inner sanctuary and outer sanctuary. Where the inner sanctuary was guarded, was cut off from the rest of it by a curtain. Well, at that point in time of Jesus' death, that curtain split right down the middle, which indicated that Jesus had just defeated death. In other words, the spiritual world and the living world, the veil was torn between the two. So Jesus was, he was dead, buried in a tomb, and he was resurrected. And he spent X number of days with the apostles or the disciples, and then he ascended to heaven and said, one of these days I shall return. Well, Jesus showed that day that death is not the end. Death used to be all of it. You were done. But now, death has been defeated because Jesus has risen. And that is why, to this day, we have the sunrise services on Sunday mornings, on Easter Sunday. We celebrate not only Jesus' birth with Christmas, but now we celebrate Jesus' resurrection on Easter Sunday. But and it's one of the biggest victories in human and spiritual history, the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ. But I just want to say thank you to all of y'all that listen to my Sunday message. God bless you. Have a very blessed Easter. Eat them chocolate bunnies, hide them eggs, do all the stuff that you do to celebrate Easter. But remember, He is risen.